The alarm system didn't trigger. That was the first thing that registered in Alessandro Vitale's mind, as he moved silently through the darkened hallway of his penthouse, gun drawn, every sense on high alert. It was 4:56 in the morning, and someone was in his home, in his sanctuary, the one place in the entire city where he was supposed to be untouchable. He'd woken to a sound that didn't belong, not the familiar hum of the climate control or the distant traffic from the streets below. This was different, human, a soft, muffled sound that had pulled him from sleep with the instant alertness of a man who'd spent 35 years surviving in a world where letting your guard down for even a moment could mean death. Alessandro Vitale was not a man who frightened easily. As the head of the Vitale family, one of the most powerful crime organizations on the East Coast, he'd built his reputation on being utterly unshakable, cold, calculating, ruthless when necessary. He'd survived 3 assassination attempts, countless betrayals, and a childhood that would have broken most men. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford, but as he moved through his penthouse, every instinct screaming that something was very wrong, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not fear exactly, but unease, a prickling at the back of his neck that told him whatever he was about to find would change everything. The sound came again, clearer now that he was closer. It was crying, soft, broken sobbing that seemed to echo through the silence of his home. A woman's voice, raw with a grief so profound it made something in his chest tighten, despite his best efforts to remain detached. He rounded the corner into his living room and froze. She was sitting on his leather couch, the one positioned to face the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. Her back was to him, but he could see her shoulders shaking with each sob. Long, dark hair fell in waves down her back, and she was wearing what looked like a simple dress, pale blue, that seemed to glow in the pre-dawn darkness. Alessandro's mind raced through possibilities. An assassin using an unusual approach? A trap set by one of his enemies? But even as he considered these options, something told him this was different. The way she sat, curled into herself, the rawness of her grief, it felt genuine in a way that couldn't be faked. He kept his gun trained on her as he reached for the light switch with his free hand. The room flooded with light, and the woman's sobbing cut off abruptly. She turned to face him, and Alessandro felt the world tilt on its axis. He knew this face, had known it once, a lifetime ago, though it had been softer then, younger, less marked by pain. But those eyes, those distinctive amber eyes that had haunted his dreams for 15 years, they were unmistakable. Isabel. The gun nearly slipped from his hand. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the ghost sitting in his living room. Because that's what she had to be. A ghost, an hallucination, a trick of his exhausted mind. Because Isabel Carter had been dead for 15 years. He'd attended her funeral, had stood in the rain as they lowered her casket into the ground, had lived every day since with the weight of her death on his conscience, knowing that his world, his choices, his enemies had killed the only woman he'd ever loved. "You're not real," he heard himself say, his voice rough and strange to his own ears. "You can't be real." She stood slowly, and he could see she was trembling. Her face was tear-streaked, her eyes red and swollen. She looked older than the 22-year-old girl he'd known, which made sense because she would be 37 now if she were alive. But she wore those years in a way that somehow made her even more beautiful, more real. "Alessandro," she whispered, his name breaking in the middle. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't know where else to go." "How did you get in here?" he demanded, his training kicking in despite his shock. "This building has security, cameras, guards, alarms. No one gets into this penthouse without my knowledge." She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture so familiar it sent pain lancing through his chest. "Your code, it's still the same. 31827. The date we met, you never changed it." He had changed it, multiple times over the years. Had cycled through dozens of different combinations as part of his security protocols. But 3 months ago, in a moment of what he could only call weakness, he'd changed it back to those numbers. The date that had started everything. October 3rd, 1987. She couldn't know that. No one knew that except him and Antonio, his head of security, who'd questioned the choice but ultimately obeyed. Which meant either she was who she appeared to be, or this was the most elaborate setup he'd ever encountered. "Prove it," he said flatly, still holding the gun though he'd lowered it slightly. "Prove you're Isabel Carter. Tell me something only she would know." She met his eyes, and in them he saw such sadness it made his breath catch. "You have a scar on your left shoulder blade, shaped like a crescent moon. You got it when you were 7 years old, pushed off a swing by your brother Marco. You told everyone you fell, protected him even though he'd done it on purpose because he was jealous of the attention you were getting from your father. Alessandro's hand tightened on the gun. That story was known to his family, could have been learned through research or interrogation, but she wasn't finished. The night before I died, she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, we were in your old apartment, the one on Chambers Street that you kept secret from your family. It was raining, and you were worried about a meeting you had the next day with the Breslin family. You thought they were going to try something, make a move against your father. You wanted to call it off, stay with me, but I told you to go. I told you that your family needed you, that we had all the time in the world. Her voice broke on the last words, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I told you we had all the time in the world, and then I died the next day, except I didn't die. Alessandro, I've been living in hell for 15 years, and I need you to help me. The gun fell from his hand, clattering on the hardwood floor. Alessandro crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbing Isabel by the shoulders. Up close, he could see every detail. The tiny scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident, the fleck of green in her right eye that made it slightly different from the left, the exact way her hair curled at the temples. How? He demanded, his voice raw. How are you alive? I saw your body. I identified you. I buried you. You buried someone else, she said, meeting his gaze steadily despite her tears. Someone they made look enough like me to fool everyone. Someone they killed to replace me. Who is they? She pulled away from his grip, turning back toward the windows. The sky was beginning to lighten, the first hints of dawn painting the horizon. Your enemies. My father's enemies. People who wanted leverage over you and saw me as the perfect tool. Alessandro felt rage building in his chest, the kind of cold, focused fury that had made him one of the most feared men in the city. Someone faked your death and held you prisoner for 15 years? Who? Give me names and they're dead by sunset. Isabel turned back to him, and the look in her eyes stopped him cold. It wasn't that simple. It was never that simple. She moved to the couch and sat down heavily, as if her legs could no longer support her. You need to sit down. What I have to tell you, it's going to change everything. Alessandro remained standing, every muscle tense. I've been standing in boardrooms with men who wanted to kill me, sitting at tables with people planning my death. Whatever you have to say, I can handle it. Can you? She asked softly. Can you handle learning that everything you've believed for 15 years was a lie? Can you handle learning that the man you've called father, the man you've killed for, built an empire for, is not who you think he is? What are you talking about? Isabel took a shuddering breath. The night I died, the night you thought I died, I'd found something. Documents in my father's safe. He was the district attorney, remember? He had files on everyone, including your family. I was curious about you, about your world, so I looked. And what I found, Alessandro, it destroyed everything. Tell me, your father, Giovanni Vitale, and my father, District Attorney James Carter, they were working together, had been for years. My father wasn't investigating your family's crimes. He was helping cover them up in exchange for a cut of the profits and political support. It was all a lie, Alessandro. The righteous DA fighting organized crime, the dangerous mob boss on the wrong side of the law. They were partners. Alessandro's legs felt weak, but he refused to sit. That's impossible. My father hated the DA, called him a sanctimonious hypocrite. They were enemies. They were friends, Isabel corrected. Had been since college. Everything else was theater, a show for the public, and for people like you and me who were kept in the dark. She stood again, moving closer to him. I confronted my father about it that night, told him I was going to tell you, expose everything, and her voice broke. He called Giovanni, and your father made a choice. What choice? To eliminate the threat. Me. They couldn't risk me telling you the truth because you were the wild card, the son who'd always questioned the family business, who'd only stayed because of loyalty to your father. If you knew the truth, if you knew how deep the corruption went, you might have walked away from all of it, might have exposed them both. Alessandro felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath his feet. You're saying my father ordered your death? Had you killed to keep you from telling me the truth? Yes, Isabel whispered. But at the last moment something changed. One of the men he sent to kill me, his name was Thomas Brennan. He'd known your mother before she died, had loved her, actually, and he couldn't bring himself to kill an innocent girl in cold blood, so he made it look like he'd succeeded. Found a girl, a prostitute from the docks who'd overdosed that night, made her face unrecognizable, staged the whole scene, and then what? Where have you been for 15 years? Thomas took me to his brother in Montana, changed my name, gave me a new identity. I became Sarah Brennan, a widow living a quiet life in a small town. I wanted to contact you so many times, Alessandro. Wanted to tell you I was alive. But Thomas said if I did, if your father or mine even suspected I'd survived, they'd finish the job. They'd kill me, and probably kill you too for knowing the truth. Then why now? Alessandro's voice was hard, controlled, but inside he felt like he was shattering into 1,000 pieces. Why come back after 15 years? Why risk everything now? Because 3 days ago, Thomas was murdered. She met his eyes, and in hers, he saw terror. Shot 3 times in the head, execution style, in his home in Montana. And before he died, he managed to call me, told me to run, told me they'd found out I was alive, that they were coming for me, told me the only person who could protect me now was you. Alessandro's mind was racing. If this was true, if even half of it was true, his entire life had been built on lies. Every choice he'd made, every person he'd hurt, every line he'd crossed, all of it in service to a father who'd killed the woman he loved and let him believe she was dead for 15 years. Your father, he said slowly. James Carter. Where is he now? Dead, Isabel said. Died 8 years ago. Heart attack officially. But I always wondered if it was Giovanni tying up loose ends. And Thomas Brennan's murder. You think my father ordered that too? Who else? If he found out Thomas helped me fake my death, kept me hidden all these years. Isabel shook her head. Your father doesn't forgive betrayal, Alessandro. You know that better than anyone. He did know that. Had seen firsthand how Giovanni Vitale dealt with people who crossed him. Had been forced to participate in that justice himself, more times than he cared to remember. But this, his own father killing the woman he loved, letting him grieve for 15 years while she lived in hiding. This was beyond anything he'd imagined. I need proof, he said finally. Everything you've told me. I need to see evidence. Because if this is true, if my father did what you're saying, then nothing in my life means what I thought it meant. Isabel reached into the small purse he only now noticed sitting on the couch. She pulled out a flash drive. Everything's on here. Copies of the documents I found in my father's safe. Thomas kept them all these years as insurance. Financial records showing money transfers between your father and mine. Meeting logs. Even recordings. My father was paranoid. Kept records of everything. It's all here. Alessandro took the flash drive, the small piece of plastic and metal feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. If this is real, if this checks out, my father is a dead man. You understand that? I understand, Isabel said quietly. I understand that's what needs to happen. But Alessandro, there's more. Something else you need to know. Something that, her voice broke again. Something that's going to hurt more than anything else. What could possibly hurt more than learning my entire life has been a lie? She met his eyes, and in that moment, he saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. Before they took me, before Thomas helped me fake my death, I didn't know. I had no idea. But after I was safe in Montana, I found out. And I've been living with this secret, this guilt, for 15 years. Isabel, what are you talking about? She took his hand, placing it flat against her stomach. The gesture was so intimate, so unexpected, that he almost pulled away. I was pregnant, Alessandro. The night I disappeared, I was 6 weeks pregnant with your child. The world stopped. Time stopped. Everything stopped. Alessandro stared at her, at the tears streaming down her face, at her hand holding his against her stomach, and he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was saying. I have a daughter, Isabel continued, her voice shaking. Our daughter. Her name is Lily. She's 14 years old, and she has your eyes, your smile, your stubborn determination, and she doesn't know anything about you because I couldn't tell her. Couldn't risk her trying to find you. Couldn't risk putting her in danger. So I told her father died before she was born. And she's believed that lie her whole life. Alessandro pulled his hand away, stumbling backwards. He felt like someone had reached into his chest and torn out his heart. A daughter. He had a daughter. Had missed 14 years of her life. First steps. First words. First day of school. Everything. All because of his father's lies. Where is she? He heard himself ask, his voice distant and hollow. Where is she now? With Thomas's sister in Montana. She thinks I'm visiting my sick mother in Seattle. I couldn't bring her here. Couldn't put her in danger. But Alessandro, if your father knows I'm alive, if he's already killed Thomas, it's only a matter of time before he finds Lily too. And when he does, Isabel's voice broke completely, sobbing now. When he does, he'll kill her just like he tried to kill me, because she's proof of the lie, proof that I survived. Alessandro felt something inside him break, not just crack, but shatter completely, like glass under too much pressure. For 15 years he'd mourned Isabel, had lived with the guilt of her death, believing his world had killed her, had hardened himself, made himself colder, more ruthless, telling himself it was necessary to survive in the life his father had built. And all that time, she'd been alive, raising their daughter, living in fear, hiding from the man he'd called father, the man he'd trusted above all others. The rage that filled him then was unlike anything he'd ever felt. It was pure and cold and absolute. Giovanni Vitale had taken everything from him. His love, his child. 15 years he could never get back. And for what? To protect his partnership with a corrupt DA? To maintain his grip on power? Get dressed, Alessandro said, his voice like ice. We're leaving. Now. Where are we going? To get our daughter. And then, he met Isabel's eyes, and she flinched at what she saw in them. Then I'm going to have a conversation with my father, and one of us isn't walking away from it. Over the next hour, Alessandro moved with the cold efficiency that had made him so effective in his father's organization. He made calls, activated resources, set plans in motion. Within 30 minutes, he had a private plane ready at Teterboro. Within an hour, they were wheels up, heading to Montana. Isabel sat across from him in the plane's luxurious cabin, watching him work. You've changed, she said quietly. You're harder than you were, colder. You've been gone 15 years, he replied without looking up from his phone. People change, especially when they think the person they loved most in the world is dead because of them. It wasn't because of you, it was because of them. But I didn't protect you, Alessandro said, finally meeting her eyes. That's the same thing. You were in danger because of me, because of my world, and I failed you. I won't fail you again, and I sure as hell won't fail our daughter. The words felt strange on his tongue. Our daughter. He had a daughter, a 14-year-old girl who didn't know he existed. The thought was both terrifying and wonderful, filling him with emotions he'd kept locked away for so long he'd forgotten how to feel them. Tell me about her, he said, setting aside his phone. Tell me everything. And Isabel did. For the next 2 hours, as the plane carried them toward Montana, she told him about Lily, about how she'd been a quiet baby, thoughtful even then, always watching everything with those dark eyes she'd inherited from him, about how she loved music, played piano and guitar with a natural talent that took Isabel's breath away, about how she was brilliant in school but struggled with friends because she was too intense, too serious, too much like her father. She asks about you sometimes, Isabel said softly, about her father. Wants to know what you were like, if you would have loved her. And every time, I have to lie. Have to tell her you died in an accident before she was born, that you never got to know about her. And it breaks my heart because the truth is, Alessandro, you would have loved her so much. Would have been an amazing father if you'd been given the chance. I still can be, he said, if she'll let me, if we can keep her safe. They landed in Billings just after noon. A car was waiting, and they drove through the Montana countryside, so different from the urban landscape Alessandro was used to. Big sky, open spaces, clean air. He could see why Isabel had chosen to raise their daughter here, far from the violence and corruption of his world. The house was modest, a ranch-style home on 5 acres outside of town. As they pulled up, a woman came out onto the porch. She was in her 60s, with kind eyes and graying hair. Margaret Brennan, Thomas's sister, who'd helped hide Isabel all these years. She took one look at Alessandro and her expression hardened. So you're him, the father. Thomas told me about you over the years. Said you were a good man caught in a bad situation. I'm not sure I'm a good man, Alessandro replied, but I'm here to protect my daughter. That has to count for something. Margaret studied him for a long moment, then nodded. She's inside, practicing piano. She doesn't know anything about why you're really here. Isabel said you'd figure out what to tell her. As they walked toward the house, Alessandro's heart was pounding harder than it ever had, facing down armed enemies or walking into dangerous meetings. He was about to meet his daughter, a daughter who didn't know he existed, didn't know that her entire life was about to change. The sound of piano music drifted through the open windows, something classical, Chopin maybe, played with skill and feeling, beyond what he'd expect from a 14-year-old. Isabel paused at the door, her hand on the knob. Are you ready for this? She asked. No, Alessandro admitted, but I don't think I ever could be. They entered the house, and the music stopped. A voice called out from the living room. Aunt Margaret, I thought you were at the store. Mom, you're back early. Did everything go okay with Grandma? And then she appeared in the doorway, and Alessandro's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful, tall for her age, with long dark hair and those eyes, his eyes, staring at him with curiosity and confusion. She had Isabel's delicate features, but his bone structure, his intensity. She was wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her feet bare, completely unaware that she was looking at her father for the first time. "Lily," Isabel said, her voice shaking, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Can you sit down, sweetheart?" "Mom, what's wrong?" Lily asked, but her eyes never left Alessandro's face. "Who is this man?" "This is Alessandro Vitale," Isabel said. "And honey, he's not just anyone. He's—" She took a shaking breath. "He's your father. He didn't die before you were born. I've been lying to you for your entire life, and I am so sorry." The silence that followed was deafening. Lily stared at them, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and then anger. "That's not funny, Mom. Why would you say something like that?" "Because it's true," Alessandro said, finding his voice, his daughter's voice. "I know this is a shock. Trust me, it's a shock for me too. I just found out about you this morning. But Lily," he took a step closer, "I am your father, and I know I have no right to ask anything from you, no right to even be standing here. But I need you to listen to your mother, listen to what she has to say. And then, if you want me to leave and never come back, I will." Lily looked at her mother, betrayal written across her face. "Is this true? Is he really my father?" "Yes," Isabel whispered. "I'm so sorry, baby. I was trying to protect you, trying to keep you safe, but everything's changed now, and you need to know the truth. If you've been enjoying this intense journey of revelation and reunion, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We have so many more powerful stories to share with you. Your support means everything. Now, let's continue with this family's fight for survival." Over the next hour, Isabel told Lily everything, a modified version, one that left out the most violent details but conveyed the essential truth, that she'd been in danger, that Alessandro's world was dangerous, that she'd been forced to fake her death and hide, keeping Lily's existence a secret to protect her. Lily listened in silence, her face unreadable. When Isabel finished, she turned to Alessandro. "So, you're a criminal, a mobster or whatever, like in the movies." "It's more complicated than that," Alessandro said carefully. "But yes, I run an organization that operates outside the law. I've done things I'm not proud of, things you probably shouldn't know about. But Lily, everything I've done, I thought it was necessary, thought I was protecting my family, honoring my father. Now I know better. And what? You expect me to just accept this? Accept you?" Lily's voice was rising, emotion finally breaking through. "I've spent my whole life without a father, wondering what was wrong with me that he didn't want to stick around, even though Mom said he died. And now you show up and tell me that was all a lie? That you were alive this whole time and just, what, didn't care enough to find us?" "I didn't know," Alessandro said, keeping his voice steady even though her words cut deep. "If I had known, Lily, if I'd had even the slightest idea you existed, nothing in this world could have kept me away. Nothing. How am I supposed to believe that?" "You're not," Alessandro replied honestly. "You have no reason to trust me, no reason to believe anything I say. All I can do is show you, over time, that I mean what I say, that you and your mother are the most important things in my life now, more important than my business, more important than my father, more important than anything." Lily stared at him for a long moment, and Alessandro could see her trying to decide if she believed him. Finally she said, "Mom said we're in danger, that someone is trying to hurt us." "My father," Alessandro said, the words bitter on his tongue. "The man I've served my entire life. He's the threat. He tried to kill your mother 15 years ago. And now that he knows she's alive, he'll come for both of you unless I stop him. How are you going to stop him?" "I'm going to remove him from power," Alessandro said simply, "and I'm going to make sure he can never hurt this family again." "You're going to kill him," Lily said. It wasn't a question. "Your own father." "Yes, and that doesn't bother you? Doesn't make you wonder what kind of man you are?" Alessandro met his daughter's eyes, seeing the judgment there, the fear of what he was capable of. "It makes me very aware of what kind of man I am," he said quietly. "But I've learned something today. I've learned that being a good person and being a good father sometimes means making hard choices, choices that cost you. And protecting my family, protecting you and your mother, that's worth any price." They left Montana that evening, Margaret Brennan agreeing to close up the house and follow in a few days. The flight back to New York was tense. Lily sat as far from Alessandro as possible in the plane's cabin, headphones in, shutting out the world. Isabel sat between them, a bridge between father and daughter. She needs time, Isabel said quietly. This is a lot for a 14-year-old to process. I know, Alessandro replied, and I'm prepared to give her all the time she needs. But first, I need to make sure she has a future to process it in. When they landed in New York, it was past midnight. Alessandro had made arrangements for Isabel and Lily to stay at a safe house he kept for emergencies, a luxury condo in a building with top-tier security and guards he trusted with his life. As he got them settled, he couldn't help but feel a pang of longing. This should have been his family, should have been his life. Coming home to Isabel every night, watching Lily grow up, being a husband and a father instead of a criminal and a soldier. But 15 years had been stolen from them, and someone was going to pay for that. Before he left, he pulled Isabel aside. I need to ask you something. The flash drive you gave me with all the evidence. Is there anyone else who knows about it? Any other copies? Thomas had one, but I assume whoever killed him took it. And my father's copies were destroyed after he died. Why? Because when I confront my father, I want him to know exactly what I have. Want him to understand that his secrets are no longer safe. Alessandro's expression was grim, but I also need to make sure that evidence doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Can't have the police or the feds getting it before I've dealt with the family business. What are you going to do? Isabel asked. What needs to be done? Alessandro replied. Trust me. She took his hand. I trusted you 15 years ago when I fell in love with a man from a world I didn't understand. I trusted you this morning when I broke into your house and asked for help. I'm not going to stop trusting you now. That night, Alessandro returned to his penthouse and spent hours going through the files on the flash drive. What he found was even worse than he'd imagined. His father and James Carter hadn't just been partners. They'd been running a shadow empire, using the DA's office to target their competitors while protecting the Vitale family interests. They'd framed innocent people, buried evidence, even arranged for witnesses to disappear, and woven through all of it was evidence of something else. His father had known about Isabel's pregnancy, had known Alessandro's child was out there somewhere, and he'd done nothing, had let Alessandro believe both were dead, had stolen 15 years of his son's life for the sake of maintaining power. By dawn, Alessandro had made his decision. He called a meeting of the family's inner circle for that evening. All the capos, all the key players in the organization, and he called his father, Giovanni Vitale, the man who'd built the empire and ruled it for 40 years. The meeting was held at one of the family's legitimate businesses, a high-end restaurant that closed to the public for private events. As Alessandro arrived, he could feel the tension. Word had gotten out that something big was happening, that the prince was finally making his move. Giovanni was already there, sitting at the head of the table like a king holding court. He was 72 years old, but still sharp, still dangerous. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccable. He looked every inch the respectable businessman he pretended to be. Alessandro, Giovanni said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This is unexpected. What's so urgent it couldn't wait for our regular meeting? Alessandro moved to stand at the other end of the table, all the capos and soldiers between him and his father. I have something to show everyone, something that's going to change everything. He pulled out a laptop and connected it to the screen on the wall. Then he began to play the evidence, financial records, recordings, video of meetings between Giovanni and James Carter. Everything Isabel had given him, everything her father had documented. The room grew silent as the evidence mounted. The capos shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. Some looked shocked, others looked calculating, already considering what this meant for the balance of power. When it was over, Alessandro faced his father. You've been lying to all of us for decades, working with the DA, manipulating investigations, using your position to eliminate rivals and protect your interests at the expense of the family's security. Giovanni's expression hadn't changed. He still sat calmly, fingers steepled in front of him. And you got this evidence where? From a ghost? From Isabel Carter? Alessandro said, and had the satisfaction of seeing genuine shock cross his father's face. That's right. She's alive. Has been for 15 years. The same 15 years you let me believe she was dead. The same 15 years you kept me from knowing I had a daughter. The room erupted in murmurs. Everyone knew about Isabel Carter, knew about Alessandro's lost love. It was part of his legend, the tragedy that had hardened him into the cold enforcer he'd become. You're lying, Giovanni said, but Alessandro could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Then explain the evidence. Explain the recordings. Explain why your partner James Carter documented everything, including your order to kill an innocent woman whose only crime was discovering the truth. She wasn't innocent, Giovanni snapped, his composure finally cracking. She was a threat to everything we'd built, everything I'd built. I did what was necessary to protect this family. You protected yourself, Alessandro corrected, and you stole 15 years of my life doing it. 15 years with the woman I loved. 15 years with my daughter. All so you could maintain your partnership with a corrupt DA. He looked around the room at the assembled men. This is what we've been serving. Not a family. Not a code. But one man's greed and paranoia. One man's willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone, even his own son's happiness, for power. You don't understand, Giovanni said, standing now. You've always been too soft, Alessandro. Too concerned with honor and loyalty. This business, our world, it requires hard choices, sacrifices. Oh, I understand sacrifice, Alessandro replied, his voice cold as ice. I understand making hard choices. I'm about to make one right now. He pulled out a gun, and suddenly everyone in the room was tense. But Alessandro didn't point it at his father. Instead, he set it on the table in front of him. I'm challenging you, he said formally, using the old rules that had governed the family for generations, for leadership of this family. You can accept and face me yourself, or you can refuse and admit you've lost the right to lead. Giovanni stared at him, and for the first time, Alessandro saw fear in his father's eyes. You'd kill your own father? You killed my family, Alessandro said. You took everything from me. Now I'm taking everything from you. The room held its breath. Giovanni looked around, seeing the same calculation in every face. The capos knew which way the wind was blowing. They'd followed Giovanni because he was strong, ruthless, effective. But Alessandro was all those things too, and younger, and now he had righteous anger on his side. Giovanni, Marco Vitale said, Alessandro's uncle, and one of the most respected men in the organization. You need to step down. This has gone too far. Giovanni's face went red with rage. I built this family. Everything you have is because of me, and you've destroyed it, Marco said sadly, by putting your own interests above the family, by lying to us all, by hurting your own son. It's over, Giovanni. One by one, the other men at the table voiced their agreement. The tide had turned. Giovanni Vitale's reign was over. In the end, it was almost anticlimactic. Giovanni was stripped of his authority, placed under house arrest while the family decided his ultimate fate. Alessandro became the new head of the Vitale organization. Though he knew his first acts as boss would be controversial, he began dismantling his father's empire, the corrupt partnerships, the connections with dirty cops and politicians. All of it. He took the evidence Isabel had given him and used it strategically, giving enough to law enforcement to topple the corrupt network while protecting the parts of the family business he deemed worth saving. It took weeks of careful maneuvering, of making deals and calling in favors. But gradually, a new structure emerged, one that was cleaner, if not entirely clean, one that had rules and boundaries his father had never respected. Through it all, Isabel and Lily stayed at the safe house. Alessandro visited every day, bringing dinner, spending time getting to know his daughter. It was awkward at first. Lily maintained her distance, her anger at being lied to for 14 years still raw. But slowly, gradually, she began to soften. She started asking questions about him, about his life, about the man he was beyond the criminal organization. And Alessandro answered honestly, holding nothing back. He told her about growing up in the family business, about the violence he'd witnessed and participated in, about the things he'd done that kept him awake at night. I'm not going to pretend I'm a good man, he told her one evening. I've hurt people, killed people, made choices I can never take back. But I need you to know that everything I've done, I thought was for the right reasons, to protect my family, to honor my father. Now I know better, and I'm trying to do better. Can you really walk away from all of it? Lily asked. From the criminal stuff. I can't walk away completely, Alessandro admitted. There are obligations, responsibilities, people who depend on me. But I can change how we operate, can make it less about violence and more about business, can try to build something I won't be ashamed to pass on to the next generation. Lily looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something other than anger or judgment in her eyes. He saw hope. Do you mean that? About the next generation? If you'll let me. Alessandro said, I missed the first 14 years of your life, Lily. I can't get those back. But if you're willing, I'd like to be part of the rest of it. Be the father I should have been from the beginning. She didn't answer immediately, just looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I don't know if I can call you Dad yet. That feels weird. That's okay, Alessandro replied. You can call me Alessandro, or Alex, or nothing at all. Whatever you're comfortable with. I'm just grateful for the chance to try. 3 months after that night at 4:56 in the morning when he'd found Isabel crying in his living room, Alessandro stood in the garden of his estate, watching his daughter play piano through the window. She'd moved in with him and Isabel 2 weeks ago, agreeing to give life as a family a try. It was strange, this new life, domestic in ways he'd never imagined for himself. He came home to dinner instead of late-night meetings, helped Lily with homework instead of planning operations, fell asleep beside Isabel instead of alone in his cold, empty bed. It wasn't perfect. Lily still had moments where the anger and hurt resurfaced, still struggled with the lies she'd been told and the dangerous world she'd been pulled into. And Alessandro still had his business to run, still made hard choices that kept him awake at night. But it was real. It was his. And after 15 years of living in the shadow of loss, it felt like coming home. "You're brooding again," Isabel said, appearing beside him. She slipped her hand into his, and he squeezed it gently. "Just thinking," he replied, "about everything that's changed, everything we almost didn't have." "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Taking down your father? Changing everything?" "Not for a second," Alessandro said. He turned to face her fully. "You and Lily, you're my family now. My real family. Everything else is just business." She smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "You know, the night I came to you, the night I broke into your house and sat crying in your living room, I was so scared. Scared you'd turn me away. Scared you'd change so much you wouldn't help me. Scared that the man I'd loved was gone. And now I know he was just buried, hidden under all the walls you'd built to protect yourself. But he's still there. Still the man who made me fall in love with him all those years ago." They stood together in silence for a moment, watching Lily through the window. Then Isabel said quietly, "What did she whisper to you that morning when she told you about being pregnant?" "You never told me exactly what she said." Alessandro remembered that moment with perfect clarity, the way Isabel had taken his hand and placed it on her stomach, the way his whole world had stopped. She said, "I have a daughter, our daughter. Her name is Lily. She's 14 years old and she has your eyes." He looked at Isabel, seeing the tears gathering in her eyes, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew about myself, about my life, it all shattered. I realized I'd been living a lie, that I'd missed so much, that I could have had this, could have had you and her, if my father hadn't stolen it from us. "But we have it now," Isabel said. "Maybe it's 15 years late. Maybe it's messier and more complicated than it would have been. But we have it, Alessandro. We have each other. We have Lily. We have a chance to build something real." She was right, of course. They couldn't get back the lost years, couldn't undo the lies and the pain and the years of separation, but they could move forward, could build a future together. The door to the house opened, and Lily stepped out. She'd been practicing for hours, preparing for a recital at her new school. She approached them hesitantly, and Alessandro could see she had something on her mind. "Can I ask you something?" she said, looking at Alessandro. "It's about your father, about what he did." "Of course," Alessandro replied. "You can ask me anything. Are you going to kill him?" The question was direct, no avoiding it. Alessandro had been wondering when she'd ask. The family had kept Giovanni alive, under strict guard, while they sorted through the mess he'd left behind. But everyone knew it was only a matter of time before a final decision had to be made. "Do you want the truth?" Alessandro asked. "Always." "Then yes, probably. He's too dangerous to leave alive, too connected to let go. And what he did, the people he hurt, the lives he destroyed, there has to be an answer for that." "And that doesn't make you like him?" Alessandro considered the question carefully. "Maybe it does. Maybe trying to be better than my father while still doing the things necessary to survive in this world is an impossible balance. But I have to try, Lily. For you, for your mother, for the family I want to build instead of the one I inherited." Lily nodded slowly, processing this. Then she said something that surprised him. "I don't think you're like him. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't think you are." "Why not?" "Because he hurt people to protect himself, to keep his power, to maintain his secrets." She met his eyes. "You're willing to hurt yourself to protect the people you love. That's different. That's what makes you better." Alessandro felt something crack in his chest, the last of his armor finally falling away. "I love you," he said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. "I know I don't have the right to say that yet. No, I haven't earned it, but I do. I love you, Lily, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being your father." For a long moment, Lily just looked at him. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a hug. It was brief, tentative, but it was real. And when she pulled back, she said quietly, "I think I might love you too, eventually, when I get used to all this. Thank you for being here for this emotional reunion. If you enjoyed this powerful story of family, betrayal, and redemption, please subscribe and turn on notifications for more incredible tales. Leave a comment and let us know what you thought. Your support helps us create more content like this. Now, let's see how this family's story concludes. 6 months after that morning at 4:56, Alessandro stood in his father's study, the same room where he'd learned the family business as a boy. Giovanni sat behind the desk, older now, diminished by his fall from power, but his eyes still held that calculating intelligence, that ruthless assessment of every situation. "You've come to kill me," Giovanni said. It wasn't a question. "I've come to say goodbye," Alessandro corrected. "The family has made its decision. You can't be allowed to live, not with everything you know, everything you could use against us if you chose to. But he paused. Before it happens, I wanted to understand. Why? Why did you kill her? Or try to? Why did you take those 15 years from me?" Giovanni leaned back in his chair. "Because you were my weakness, Alessandro. Even when you were a boy, I could see it. You cared too much, felt too deeply. And when you fell in love with that girl, with the DA's daughter of all people, I knew it would be your downfall. You would have chosen her over the family, would have walked away from everything I'd built. You're damn right I would have," Alessandro said. "If I'd known she was pregnant, if I'd had the choice, I would have left this life in a heartbeat, would have given up everything to be with them." "Exactly," Giovanni said. "That's why I had to act. The family needs ruthless leaders, Alessandro. Men who put the organization above everything else. You were becoming something else, something soft." "I was becoming human," Alessandro replied. "Something you forgot how to be a long time ago. And look where your humanity has gotten you," Giovanni said with a bitter smile. "About to murder your own father. Tell me, how is that any different from what I did? How does that make you better than me?" "Because I'm doing it to protect my family," Alessandro said. "My real family. Not an organization or a criminal empire, but the people I love. The daughter you tried to take from me. The woman you tried to kill. That's the difference, father. You destroyed families. I'm trying to save mine." He pulled out a gun, and Giovanni didn't flinch. Just looked at him with something that might have been pride, or might have been contempt. It was hard to tell with Giovanni. "One more question," Alessandro said. "Did you ever love me? As a son, not as a piece on your chessboard. Did you ever actually love me?" Giovanni was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I loved what you could have been. The perfect heir. The son who would take everything I'd built and make it greater. But you were too much like your mother. Too soft. Too concerned with things that don't matter in our world." "Love matters," Alessandro said. "Family matters. The real kind, not the crime syndicate kind. And the fact that you never understood that, that's why you're sitting here now, alone, betrayed by everyone you thought you controlled." He raised the gun, and Giovanni closed his eyes. In the end, it was quick, merciful in a way Giovanni probably didn't deserve, but Alessandro wasn't his father, wasn't capable of the cruelty that had defined Giovanni's reign. When it was over, Alessandro stood in the silent room for a long moment. He felt empty, not satisfied or victorious, just empty. He'd killed his father, had ended the line of succession in the most final way possible, and he knew that decision would haunt him for the rest of his life. But as he walked out of the house and drove back to his estate, where Isabel and Lily were waiting for him, he felt something else too: freedom, release. The weight of generations of violence and lies lifting from his shoulders. He was free to build something new, something better, something his daughter could be proud of, even if she never fully understood it. When he walked through the door of his home, Lily and Isabel were sitting on the couch, watching a movie. They both looked up as he entered, and he could see the question in their eyes. "It's done," he said simply. "It's over." Lily stood and came to him, looking up at his face with those eyes. His eyes. "Are you okay?" "I will be," Alessandro said. "With time, with you two, I'll be okay." She hugged him, and this time it wasn't tentative or brief. It was real and strong and full of the kind of love he'd thought he'd never have. Over her shoulder, he met Isabel's eyes, seeing understanding and acceptance there. She knew what he'd done, knew what it had cost him, and she loved him anyway. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Alessandro and Isabel sat on the terrace of their home, looking out at the city. "You know," Isabel said quietly, "when I came to you that morning, I didn't know if you'd help me. Didn't know if the man I'd loved was even still in there, under all the years and the hardness. And now?" Alessandro asked. "Now I know he is. More than that, I know he's trying to be better, trying to build something worth having instead of just taking what he wants." She took his hand. "I'm proud of you, Alessandro, for making the hard choice, for protecting us, for trying to be the father Lily deserves. I'm still a criminal," he pointed out. "Still running an organization that operates outside the law, still making choices that most people would consider wrong." "True," Isabel agreed. But you're also a man who stopped when he found out he had a daughter, who walked away from a lifetime of conditioning to protect his family, who killed his own father because it was the only way to keep us safe. That takes courage, Alessandro, and it takes love. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. Finally, Alessandro said, "What she whispered that morning, what you told me about Lily, it shattered me, broke apart everything I thought I knew about my life, my purpose, who I was." "I know," Isabel said. "I could see it in your eyes, but it also rebuilt me, made me into someone new, someone who could walk away from my father's legacy and build my own." He looked at her. "You saved me that morning. Both of you saved me from becoming exactly what he was." "We saved each other," Isabel replied. "You gave us safety. We gave you purpose. That's what families do." As the sun rose over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Alessandro thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that morning at 4:56 when he'd found Isabel crying in his house, to this moment, sitting beside her, building a life he'd never imagined possible. He'd lost 15 years, had missed so much of his daughter's life, had been forced to make choices that would haunt him forever, but he'd also gained something he'd thought was lost forever: a family, a real one, built on love and trust instead of fear and obligation. And that, he realized, was worth everything. Worth the betrayal, worth the pain, worth the hard choices and the blood on his hands. Because in the end, what Lily had whispered through Isabel, what she'd revealed about his daughter, his family, his chance at redemption, it had shattered him. But from those broken pieces, something new had emerged, something better, something that gave him hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than his father's son, that he could be the man his mother had wanted him to be, the man Isabel had fallen in love with, the father Lily deserved. The morning light grew stronger, illuminating the terrace, the garden, the home they'd built together. And Alessandro Vitale, once the cold enforcer of a criminal empire, now a man trying to be worthy of his family's love, allowed himself to smile, because he was home. Finally, after 15 years of being lost, he was home. The end.